Welcome to Alter Everything, a podcast about AI, analytics, and the future of work. I'm your host, Joshua Burkhow. Today, I'm joined by Ari Kaplan, Global Head of Evangelism at Databricks. Now, Ari's one of these people whose reputation far precedes him. I was really impressed by what I had heard and what I had read about him and all of his accomplishments to date. Then, I met him. And I also realized that he's as generous, caring, and as good as a human as he is unbelievably talented and intelligent. I've since been completely mesmerized. To say Ari is legendary would be a real understatement. Ari is often called the real Moneyball guy, as he's part of the inspiration for the book and major motion picture that starred Brad Pitt, Moneyball, from his work having built analytics departments for multiple Major League Baseball teams, including the Chicago Cubs. Now, he's also been influential in shaping how modern sports thinks about and uses data and analytics. Now, if all of that wasn't enough, here's where it gets even more interesting, because Ari's work goes far beyond baseball. From starting off as a young kid building operating systems at age 10, to getting into the prestigious Caltech, to influencing even Formula One racing, all the way to becoming a world-renowned AI expert and fellow evangelist, after all that having spent decades with humanitarian investigations into missing influential people that are responsible for saving thousands, even tens of thousands of people's lives. Now, if you want an inside look at someone who brings humanity and passion together in their love of interrogating data, their love of finding patterns, this episode is for you. Let's jump in. Ari, welcome to the show. As you know, I find your career really fascinating and frankly, so many different topics that I'd love to discuss with you today. How about we do the easy thing and just start at the beginning? What was young Ari like? Like, were you always fascinated by numbers and baseball and the theme of finding patterns? Was that something you were always into?
Yeah, and hey, Joshua, so good to be doing this. Yeah, young Ari, I grew up in New Jersey, started a newspaper route at 12, was kind of geeky, but cool, I guess. From a third-party perspective, I loved Mork and Mindy, Robin Williams show, into science fiction, tons into reading Ray Bradbury and other greats. So kind of like into this fantasy world, but a lot of it was in my head. This was in like a young me, sold my first computer game when I was only 6 years old, a text adventure game that there was like magazines where you could sell your stuff. And that's one thing I love about technology. It's a great equalizer. On the internet, you don't know who you're typing to, what their background is. So, hey, if you could write cool games and you're 6 years old, why not? People wouldn't know any different. And ended up writing, it's called a bulletin board service, a BBS, which is really the precursor to the internet. That was back when I was about 10 or 11 years old. But I wrote my own operating system, wrote my own programming language, compression algorithms, and then educational testing service that does the SAT and AP tests. Heard about my compression algorithm and then hired me when I was 13 years old to help do database management for ETS, which was kind of cool. So that's kind of like a summary of a young me. Loved trying to create things that never happened before. Things were simple and you're trying to create things that had never been done before, and it was just magical.
That's amazing. It's amazing. You, yeah, definitely came on early for you. What was the lead up to getting into Caltech? Caltech had to be a pretty transformational thing for you.
Yeah, Caltech, those who don't know, the California Institute of Technology, it's one of the top, sometimes it's ranked the top for sure, for science and technology. The Big Bang Theory television show really popularized it. A super small school, about 250 students or so per class. So very like difficult to get in, rigorous subject matter. But if that's your thing, if you love discovery, science, entrepreneurism, innovation, like couldn't be a better environment. You learn not just book smart, but street smart. How to pick a lock, how to pick a safe, how to make
That's awesome.
dynamite. Um, and then my brother went there before me, but the ability to do like groundbreaking research as an undergrad, I thought was the best in the world. So I'm like, I got to do this opportunity where I can do really cool research.
That's amazing. What were you most obsessed with? Were you sort of in exploratory mode and trying a bunch of different things? Or I don't think baseball had sort of really crept in yet, had it? That
Yeah.
your love for baseball?
Yeah. I was a huge baseball fan growing up as a Mets fan, but as a fan, I didn't know what to do with it. I liked a lot of things. So I just knew I loved creativity, and and still to this day, many decades later, I like sitting in the world where it's innovative. You're like at the leading edge, but what you're working with, dealing with, you can actually go and do most of it in the real world. So like
Right, right.
quantum computing is going to be huge, but at this point, it's like if you have an idea to make it into a lab, that'll take years, if not longer. And then there's some aspects of AI that is like pure research driven. And I know people love that, but I like it where I get people excited and I get myself excited and then I can actually do something. That is where, scientific curiosity and discovery is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably something you and I share is I have the same thing where I like reading research papers. I like nerding out, but I just need it to be practical. I need it to be, even with all the AI stuff, I'm much more aligned towards what I can actually do with it versus, the hype and all that stuff, which we'll probably get into for sure. I'm curious. Okay, put yourself back in the day. Caltech, I think you graduated what, 92, 91, I think. Where was your sort of next path after that?
I had a lot of opportunities. I got a job offer from JPL and Major League Baseball. And it really came down to working full time in baseball or working like in the private sector. And I ended up doing both. So I worked full time at Oracle. A lot of that they called
Hmm.
Oracle back then the Caltech grad school, since like aside from grad school, that was like the number one employer. So this is back in '82, the relational database. Believe it or not, companies would say, I don't think we have a need for a relational database. Whereas now that would be like outlandish, but that's the world back then. And I believed it. I'm like, this is going to be so huge. I can't turn this opportunity down. But I love baseball, so I ended up working with the Montreal Expos as a
Hmm.
consultant. So I kinda chose the best of both worlds. Part of me, though, also loved theoretical physics, looking at things super close. So that was a huge insight too, but if you're a sports fan, if you see the practicality of databases, those were my 2 big driving forces. Couldn't turn them down.
Did you sort of see the world of analytics? I mean, this is probably not yet data science as it was called right after that, but did you sort of see those worlds the same as physics and mathematics and science as easily applied to baseball? Or was this it seemed like you were one of the pioneers of this idea. So like how did you think about it back then versus how you think about it now?
Yeah. So here's a story I haven't told in a long time. I came up with an n-dimensional hypercube to explain the multi-state of baseball. And that's a fun phrase to say, figuring out how to predict how many runs are going to score using the approaches I used in physics. So for example, with bases loaded and nobody out, that's, 4 dimensions. Is there a runner on first base, second base, third base, and the number of outs, 0, 1, or 2. So, like, bases loaded, nobody out, 2.254 runs are expected to score. Bases loaded, 1 out, 1.87 runs are expected to score. And back then, that was kind of a novel approach. And that was like the foundation, even now, 2026, to see how did a play in the game increase or decrease the chances of scoring. So if you even like, football, we're big in the playoffs. You could watch television and it'll say win probability, the Bears going up and down, up and down. They had a 3% chance of winning. Now they have a 90% chance of winning. Oh, they just lost. That's all based on this win probability of physics. So yeah, in some ways there's overlap, um, but in some ways it's very different. Back then, we came up with our own math formulas, but now you have way better, well, two things, just classical machine learning. You have better algorithms. So like we had linear regression back then. Now there's gradient boosted trees and Vopal Wabbit and other funny names that you can analyze data better. But now you also have Gen AI. So back then, not at the very beginning, but maybe 10 years into my tenure, I looked at taking the text, the words that scouts would use, and trying to see, is there any signal? If a scout said this player is elite or deceptive, is there signal in that? And now Gen AI does a way better job of sentiment analysis of text. So some of the approaches were similar, but the technology, the algorithms, Gen AI makes it so much easier these days.
Would you say that most baseball teams, I would even stretch this out to more professional teams, are using analytics and AI the best they can, or do you think there's still pretty big gaps?
Yeah, I just did a, panel with SMWW Sports Management Worldwide, and we had myself,
Mhm.
an assistant GM, and the head of all stats for Major League Baseball. He said now there are 700 people working data and machine learning across all 30 teams. So 700. And then there are like vendors out there, people that use cameras to capture motion. So there's a lot more just in baseball. In the whole world, they estimate about 20,000 people, whether you call it data engineering, data science, data analysts, business analysts out there. So super big in baseball. Each team has now like 20, 30, 40 people all working harmoniously. McLaren Formula One has 350 people every race day looking at track conditions, real-time data, computer vision. So they may be the most data intensive. But then you have football that is still catching up. They have one or two or three.
Yeah.
Some European soccer teams 2 years ago, they'd be a customer of mine and they would have four people, and now they have eight, which to me is still pretty small.
But progress one way or another. I actually remember less than 10 years ago, I did a talk at University of Oregon to the sports management graduates. These were MBAs going for MBAs for sports management, and they had the inaugural class on analytics and data science. Not until you really get it into education programs do you start to see it permeate all the different teams and organizations. The one thing that I could have swore I read somewhere that you had talked about this with Kelsey when you interviewed him, the football player, around sensors, and I thought to myself, like, if there's ever a way to enable sports analytics more than anything else would be all the sensors. I remember, the whole fiasco around soccer and the goals and getting sensors there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, the analysis is only as good as the data that you have coming in, or that's like the maximum you could use. So back in the day, Caltech undergrad, we would only have box scores. So what happened? One number after each game. How many hits did they have? How many outs did they get? And then kind of baseball was stuck. And then we would get play-by-play data, and then we could get more granular. Then finally, fast forward from the '90s to 2007, which is a big gap, they finally got pitch-by-pitch data, which was camera-based sensors that could record XYZ coordinates, spin rate of a pitch,
Amazing.
the where the pitch was released, how consistent were they. So that was a big gap. But then with there, it really opened up the door on what types of analysis that you could do. So pitch by pitch, play by play. And yeah, Travis Kelsey, AKA Taylor Swift's fiance, my number one viral post of all time was what I did an interview with him. I was with Yahoo Sports and how he looks at data and AI. And the team does, since it really helps them. And the way it helps them is human behavior. they're stronger in the right hand or their left hand. Some players always tuck the ball after they catch it under this shoulder or this shoulder. And before cameras or smart interns that would go through video and record everything, but before the data is captured, a player would wait until their opponent catches the ball and tucks it before figuring out where to tackle them. But now you could see
Right.
80, 90% are going to do one arm. So he would remember those players and start attacking their catching shoulder before they even
Right.
catch the ball, and much, much more success. But
Fascinating.
that's why it's useful. In that case, very actionable insights that help you win a game.
So if you and we went to a let's say a Cubs game, are you going to be there watching the game, enjoying it, or are you going to be with a laptop running models, trying to figure out who's going to do what next?
Yeah, so I worked with the Cubs. I had two interesting roles. The long story short is I'm going to enjoy the game. But I had two roles. First was of a major league scout. So I like to tell people I was a Cub Scout, since I was a scout for the Cubs, but that was like looking at the player as a human, like long term, should we acquire this player or not for a multi-year contract? But then when I joined the Cubs, they realized that they needed to be more data driven. I was hired by the owner, their very first of two hires, me and someone named Theo Epstein, who ended up becoming their president of baseball operations. But even though I was strong in scouting, they had an even bigger need in transforming, creating predictive analytics engine and everything from scouting, from installing these sensors at every level. So when I worked for the Cubs before the game, I would make all of the like AI and predictive analytics like automate it. So I push a button, make sure it gets collected. After the game, some of the players, I know Kerry Wood, he was like a young prodigy, struck out 20 people in a game. I was like his analytical coach. So after every game, even though I wasn't present during the game doing it, the computer would automatically come up with analysis and we would meet in the locker room and go over his game on the computer together. But since I had automated it, I could go to the game and just sit back and enjoy looking at, I love looking at defense, which was like highly non analytical. It's more like how the flow of humans are. So I love watching the game. It's almost a good analogy for anything anyone does in work. You're analyzing things, but you also have to look at it from the perspective of what you're analyzing. If you're in a retail shop, still look at your people as consumers. You're like, I'm going into this Kroger. Can I actually find my product on the shelf? If you can't, that's kind of biasing the data itself. So that's how my mind works.
I love it so much. In doing research for this and just knowing you over the last few years, it's always comes through that you have this sort of focused, I call it a theme for lack of a better term, on this idea that all of these people that you've interacted with, whether the, athletes and, coworkers, employees, even your work with Mr. Wallenberg that we'll hopefully talk about, you always come at it from this sort of human approach. And I think it's fascinating because this is the area in AI that I'm most fascinated with is just the human impact of AI. You and I've been doing this type of work long enough to know that the computer stuff is fun and it has all these sort of implications and, building models is cool and finding new insights and stuff. But like the moment that human lives are changed, it's, my work with Alteryx is the same thing. And when you see someone get excited and literally want to change their career into analytics because of this, like now it's impactful, right? Their literally life trajectory is going to change because of it. Do you purposefully see it that way, or is that just sort of a byproduct of how you were raised and how you kind of go through the world?
I love how you see that at Alteryx as well. You're changing trajectories, people's career trajectories,
Mhm.
companies' trajectories, the industry that they're in. But yeah, that's like at my core, my passion is to try to make the world a better place with whatever powers I'm enabled with, and that could be trying to inspire other people to make a change in their world as well, or rolling up my sleeves and doing some of that work myself. So I always like being that part of human nature where you're helping do actual mega change as much as you can. And that's why it's super fascinating with Gen AI. We're only about, what, 3 years into it, and it's changing super quickly, but the impact, and I try to focus on the positive impact that it can and will have is unbelievable.
I mean, I even got into I spent maybe a good 8 hours this weekend on Suno,
Oh,
messing
yeah.
around with AI music, and it's like, it's surreal. One of the things is we randomly ran into each other because 'cause we're both traveling all the time, which has actually become quite a fun game is to try to keep up with each other. Our mutual friend Joe Reese is all over the place. Jepson Taylor, Ben Taylor, he's all over the place. Fun keeping up with everybody and traveling around. Um, does it ever go old for you? You like being able to get out and go around?
No, I love it. There's a German term for it, Wanderlust, the desire to
Wanderlust.
wander, the desire to travel. I love it. Super excited since I've never been to Brazil. I'm gonna be going there soon.
I just got back from there. Yeah.
Sweet. Never been there.
Amazing. Oh, my friend, it's so good.
And I'm going, to, Abu Dhabi in a couple weeks, and I go to India. But even in the States, we're based in San Fran and Berkeley
Hmm.
founders. I'm doing an offsite in Berkeley, and that'll be
Oh
fun. So
yeah.
I just love traveling, getting out there. Um, so no, it never gets old.
When you go a higher proportion of these visits and travels is obviously because of work. When you talk to folks around analytics and AI and all the subjects that you're sort of really passionate about, do you find that it's everybody's sort of on the same page? You find like, the US or the UK are in a bubble, or do you find that it's like you have some pretty diverse perspectives when you travel around?
Well, first of all, I find the interest expanding everywhere. Just if you use Databricks as a placebo, like in India, it's taking off. Like we're investing 250 million in that region. Brazil, one of the reasons I'm going there is that is super, super fast growing industry. Poland is interesting. People don't realize their GDP is just about as big as Great Britain or France. They're known, most of the world knows them of Poland from like the 80s or 90s, but no, they're growing quickly. The Middle East in many ways growing super fast. We opened an office in Costa Rica and that's been growing. So, of course, I'm missing out a lot of places. Amsterdam, London was super big. Singapore, super big. Australia, fewer companies, but super big as well. Finland itself, the Baltics
Right.
growing. Japan, if I didn't mention, growing super fast.
Which is, I mean, there's the reason I asked is there's significance in all that because I'm sort of finding the same, and I'm wondering to myself, like, when stuff comes out of the MITs of the world, or it comes out of a lot of the universities, or it comes out of maybe American business or something, there's sort of a bit of a bubble around it that doesn't really go fast and wide. But AI, on the other hand, is unbelievable. Everywhere you go, it's I have conversations with people who have no technical background, who have
Yeah.
agents running for them, literally looking at their work or their, day-to-day jobs and saying, "Okay, how do I tackle this? How do I even just do a percent of what I'm doing today using AI?"
Yeah, on the positive and negative sides. On the positive side, yeah, the productivity that you can get is super incredible. Like one of my biggest challenges in travel is when I travel with my family is I want to have two beds. So like I can sleep in one and like one of my kids can sleep in the other. And you go to Orbitz, you go to Travelocity, you go to Marriott.com, and there's no filter to just say 2 beds. You have to click down on each one, which is a 2-hour task, but you could just use Gen AI to do it instantly, saving me hours. That's a kind of a silly case. I mean, there's others where your, like, productivity goes way, way up, like, "Hey, how can I write a code?" Or, "I want to make an web-based application." You just type in a prompt and then you keep tweaking it and it's good enough. But then, like on the negative side, it's similar to like the Moneyball early days, where I would automate the recording of how fast is a pitch? Scouts would hold a radar gun behind home plate and record 200 pitches and send that in. But then camera technology automatically records it. So the scouts no longer have to do it. So I got two very different reactions. One were the scouts that said, "You're ruining my job. I'm going to be out of a job. How dare you? I would be physically assaulted. I'd be spit on, berated, sabotaged at work." Those were like the lowlifes. But then there were the good scouts would say, "Oh my God, this is great. You're telling me I don't have to record the velocities. I'm a scout. I should not be doing that. I want to put the gun down and just watch the players and be like a talent scout. Just look at them, free my mind, free my time." It was like 4 hours a day to record it and then write it down in sheets of paper in the room. So similarly, today you'd get people saying, "Wait a minute, we're not going to use any AI till we're 100% guaranteed security or 100% chance that there's 100% accuracy." So yeah, you might be risk averse. You might wait for some other company in your industry to solve the problems for you, but then you're going to be lagging behind. And yeah, there is something to be said if it's like puts physical danger, don't do it. But if it's better than what you're doing, seriously consider doing it, or, be cautious, but have some checkpoint where it's good enough to start using it as you perfect it even better.
Yeah. What I find most interesting about it when you kind of get deep into conversations, it's more of a human problem than a technology problem, is just people are finding out what they value most. They're finding out when AI allows them to do things that they've been wanting to do, but they've been held back, that there's a sort of positive euphoric moment. But when AI comes and does things that people have been doing because that's where they see their value, then there's this sort of juxtaposition, this conflict, and it's getting people to rethink about, like, do I really value, come to work and doing XYZ for 8 hours a day versus could I be doing something just different? Like maybe there's my value as a human is
Yeah.
held differently. One of these things that I really fascinated, I want to get into is your work with Raoul Wallenberg. You've been in data analytics and AI for years and decades, but there's this other project you have, and I want you to sort of tell our listeners about this. What got you into it? Why is it important to you? And how does the whole Uri, the data scientist and the AI expert, fall into that landscape?
I'll try to give an abbreviated and we can drill down, but as a way of background, Raoul Wallenberg was a very important historical humanitarian slash hero. He was a Swedish diplomat that rescued tens of thousands of Hungarian Jewish civilians during the Holocaust. This was at a time in late 1944 where people don't realize just the scale of the Holocaust in Hungary. 400,000 people were mass slaughtered in just a matter of months. So average day, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people every day, um, sent primarily to Auschwitz. And uh, Raoul Wallenberg came from a very wealthy family. His cousins are some of the wealthiest people in Europe and in Scandinavia, and certainly in Sweden. They have majority or major positions in Ericsson Phone and Scanda Bank and SAS Airlines and oil fields. So during the war, they're like the Rockefellers of Europe. And then he went to Michigan, University of Michigan, wanted to not live the life of luxury, but wanted to be an architect, and then ended up hearing about the plight of Jewish people and volunteered to go to Budapest and just work in the government for Sweden there. And when he got there, he saw how dire it was and then changed his course to save as many people as he could. Everything from setting up what really were not legitimate, but under the protection of the Swedish flag, safe houses, whatever it was, buy a shed, buy a large building, buy an embassy, put a flag on top of it, and then let any civilian take shelter in it. And he was also one of two people known to have stopped trains filled with civilians on their way to the death camps. Oskar Schindler was famously portrayed stopping it, but as far as I know, Wallenberg was also the only person to stop death marches. He would hand out fake counterfeit passports and just shout to people, "Hey, are you Joshua Burkhow? I have a passport with your name." And he would rescue people that way. And there are other way more dramatic methods of rescuing. So superhero, the number of descendants of the people he rescued are today in the
Just
hundreds of
thousands and
thousands of
thousands.
people.
That's wild.
Unbelievable. But the biggest tragedy was right as the war ended, right as the Soviets pushed out the Nazis, they arrested him and his driver, and he disappeared into the history bin. So, long story short, it's already too long. I'm now the president of the independent investigation into his fate. So he disappeared, but I've been one of the handful, maybe 5 or 6 people of foreigner, non-Russians, have been given top clearance to go into their archives, look through, hire a company to do data entry of eyewitness accounts, prison records, every prisoner in Vladimir prison, which was like where they kept non-citizen international prisoners, and then do data science to find what happened to him and try to piece that together. That was like the big thing. It's called the Vladimir study, Vladimir prison. But then I've also done, other trajectories of what happened using actual forensic data archival information to find his fate.
I mean, you created a database for all this, correct? Did I read that right?
Yeah, I have a huge database and of every prisoner, what cell they were in, what special marking, like if the Soviets labeled them as a Ukrainian spy or what have you. Did they die? Did they not? Did they go to the doctor and come back from the doctor? When did they arrive? Any other comments? And uh, uh, just November, so just a couple months ago, made the press since we decided, we meaning Marvin Makinen, my colleague and he and I donated the whole database to this Lithuanian center for genocidal studies and missing people, since we have information on many dozens of Lithuanians whose fate wasn't always clear as well. So yeah, he really affected the world.
Where are we in the understanding of what happened to him? And do you have a sort of sneaky suspicion that or how do we have data that we've been able to track down to?
Yeah, so there's data that shows a trajectory up to a certain point,
Hmm.
then there's conjectures. So the group before I joined found his name in Lefortovo and Lubyanka prison and his driver. And then it was proved that the death certificate was completely falsified. The doctor that signed it wasn't even working in that area, et cetera, et cetera. Then this is where I came in, and our group found interrogations of him for 16 hours after the date they said he was executed, which is why they let us into the Vladimir archives. So for sure, he was captured, sent to this prison, interrogated for over 2 years. There's a very high likelihood, based on my analytic database study, that he was given a number. So the prisoners and his colleagues don't know who he is. He's prisoner number 7, sent to Vladimir under this abstracted number, given a 25-year prison sentence, and then either died there or very likely after the 25-year prison sentence was sent to internal exile, which is kind of like the witness protection program in America. You're basically told, keep quiet, don't let anyone know who you are, since there are so many eyewitnesses. And then in 1989, his family was given all of his possessions, which leads me to think there's a good chance he died in 1989. They know where he is, they know where he's buried. And we have 17 specific questions for documents that we're not getting that would, any one or two of them would shed light on what happened. But
I can't get away from the idea that we go to work every day and we're worried about if numbers go up or down. Yet you're using that same skill set to track down and find answers for people for closure, for people to know what actually happened and really shine a light on someone that had a positive impact on our history, right? We're all trying to have this sort of positive impact that he did, yet no one knows the full story.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, there are these 17, and actually that's growing, documents they gave me that would almost certainly solve it, but they redacted. They would like do black ink over lines. So we're like, we want these documents unredacted as neutral, independent researchers that we won't disclose to the public, as well as Freedom of Information Act after 75 years, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the Geneva Convention, there's certain rights. And now he's
Hmm.
an honorary, which means a bona fide US citizen, Israeli citizen, Canadian, and Australian
Yeah.
citizen. And so those governments have right of information. So it will be solved. It's just like a political stalemate. But along the way, we've worked with POW and MIA groups to find results of other missing people that weren't Wallenberg. So we've had a lot of successes. It was definitely worth it. All those side quests, so to speak. And then
Yeah.
we kept Wallenberg's fate in the public eye, which will be resolved at some point,
What
hopefully
an
sooner than
amazing,
later.
what an amazing story that would be, right? Just to know it end to end. My friend, I feel like you and I could go on another 2 or 3 hours just chatting away. Super fascinating. As promised, I'm gonna give you a lightning round. I think I like that we spent a lot of time getting into topics, and I love the fact that you were willing to sort of go deep on them. But now I'm gonna flip the script on you. And there's only really two rules here. You have to have, short, quick answers and no hedging. It can't be like it depends if this happens or that happens. Can't be flimsy here, Ari. You have to put a stake in the ground. So only a good handful of them, and then we'll we'll close it out, and we'll leave it for another day. You ready?
I'll leave my lawyer face where it depends
Y-
off.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Just turn it off. All right, I'm gonna throw you a softball here, and then they get harder over time. So first one is the most underrated skill in AI.
Yeah, I would just say like natural curiosity to learn new methods. It's changing so quickly that like don't get set in your way. Uh, the automation of automation gets pretty meta. So
Stay curious. Love it. What are you most proud of in your career?
I would say helping the Cubs win the World Series since it
That's a pretty big
rewarded
one.
generations of fans, um, like with that satisfaction.
You be careful. You're going to get pummeled by a whole bunch of Cubs fans. What's a hobby that you like doing that most people don't know about?
I have so many, but the one I still love is virtual reality. I love
Okay.
playing Meta Quest. Like aside from family and work, I do that almost every night, many times a week. If you haven't tried video gaming on like VR, you got to try it. That's my hobby.
I might have to jump into that one. All right. If we take the Cubs World Championship out of this one, but what's your next best baseball moment?
Wow, I would love to give two, but I'll give my number one. Uh, Ernie Banks, Mr. Cub, coined the phrase "the friendly confines" in Let's Play Two. Played in, I don't like the term, but it is the term, the Negro Leagues. He played in segregated baseball, became my best friend. That's one hand. The other hand is Michael Jordan, arguably the GOAT, if not the GOAT, LeBron James, but the best player of the time in basketball. Jordan, Ernie Banks, and myself in my office at Wrigley Field, just the three of us talking about life, talking about human rights, talking about like racial discrimination in you know in America and what they each personally faced. That
Right.
was an incredible highlight.
I can't even imagine. Did Jordan try to get you over to the White Sox to do the analytics there or no?
They still are in deep need and have many years to go. But Jordan played baseball. They're like it was an experiment. Can you take what could be the greatest athlete in basketball and have him play baseball? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Uh, he had basketball skills, but for baseball, he just didn't have it. But yeah, the white box need serious help.
I don't know if we'll publish that. I don't want them coming after me. All right. I saw this and it caught my eye that you did a little bit of playing in band at Caltech. Best jazz great. Who do you go to for jazz?
Oh, since you mentioned that, I'll say Michael Peter Balzery,
All
otherwise known
right.
as Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
In a way, that's kind of a tongue in cheek since I was in jazz band at Caltech and he would, and I hear he still does once in a while, sit in on the Thursday night jazz band. So he would
Wow.
come in and just sit in and play with no fanfare, no media.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm in Chicago. We're great for blues and jazz. So
Exactly.
I would say Dizzy Gillespie for pure skills would be my next go-to.
All right. You sort of answered this previously, but I'd love to sort of a rehash or retake of it. If I had a free plane ticket in my hand, would you go back to somewhere that you've already been, that you just absolutely love and admire, or would you choose a new place you've never been to?
It's hard. I'm still of the mindset there's so many places I haven't been to, so I would try something new.
Yeah. Even the risk that it ends up
Yeah,
terrible is still rewarding in that regard. I'm
yeah.
the same.
Try to do a new culture, try to meet different type of person or experience I haven't done before.
Love it. I love it. Ari, my friend, thank you so much for your time. I will have to sync up calendars so I get to see you somewhere on the road and all our travels. But I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Amazing conversation.
Yeah, you bet. No, this has been great. You're an awesome person. So honored to have been on here and great to run into you. And yeah, we'll sync up and figure out
Absolutely.
meeting.
Thank you again, Ari. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Here are a few key takeaways that I took from my conversation with Ari. Stay relentlessly curious, but also practical. You know, the success in Ari's career is about building what's actually usable in the real world, staying a few years ahead of the curve, and also moving on once breakthroughs become commonplace. The second thing is better data changes the game. You know, sports analytics exploded as the inputs evolved. So from box scores, they went to play-by-play, to pitch-by-pitch, and even sensor camera data today. The more granular the data, the more actionable the insights became. Now, this last one is one that I really hold closely. And I believe that AI is ultimately a human story. You know, the tech is powerful, but the real work is navigating how AI is going to reshape identities, our jobs, our decision-making, and ultimately freeing all of us up from the mundane task. Ari's Wallenberg investigation is really a reminder that your data skills can serve something bigger than ourselves, uncovering things like truth, bringing closure, and even driving a positive impact. Now, before you go, if you liked today's episode, can I ask you a personal favor and share it with your friends and colleagues? Let us know what resonated, what you want us to explore next. You can email us at podcast@alteryx.com. That's ALTERYX. You can subscribe to Alter Everything on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.